guys, I'm Rod Rodriguez, radio DJ, event host, podcaster, content creator, and 100% comic book nerd. I was about 12 years old when I started collecting Marvel, DC, and independent comics and really got into the hobby. No internet yet, so I had to get comics at the comic book shops in our area. I had to save my money to attend comic book conventions to meet famous comic book writers and artists, and hopefully get my hands on some of the rare issues as well. And years later, I only have a fraction of my collection still with me because I gave the bulk of them to my dad, but my memories and fascination for comic books remain. On this episode of Show and Tell, let's find out more about graphic novels. And since I don't follow anime and Japanese manga religiously, we will cover major titles from Marvel and DC only. For those who don't know, a graphic novel is a fictional story that is presented in comic strip format and it's published as a book or mini series. It's usually a standalone story and not a continuation of the original comic book storyline, and usually non-canon. So for example, if it's a graphic novel about Superman, it doesn't necessarily follow the storyline that is currently present in the Superman comic book line. Graphic novels are basically novels with graphics. There's artwork accompanying it, so it's basically a novel in comic book format. It has a deeper, richer, and more realistic story, and it's definitely more serious than a typical comics issue. It's often written and drawn by renowned writers and artists. So on this episode, our graphic novel is one of the landmark, groundbreaking graphic novels of all time. And probably one of the main reasons why graphic novels became popular during the mid-80s to the mid-90s. It is also considered one of Time Magazine's top 10 graphic novels of all time. The Dark Knight Returns is a 1986 4-issue comic book miniseries. Of course, it stars Batman as the Dark Knight, and it was written by renowned artist Frank Miller, who is also responsible for a lot of other groundbreaking work. He's worked on Wolverine, among others. And it's illustrated by, of course, Frank Miller, inked by Klaus Janson, and colored by Lynn Varley. And it was published by DC Comics. So since this one came out way before the Dark Knight or Batman movies, you know that it had a strong influence in the story arc and the look and feel and the grit of the more recent modern Batman films. The Dark Knight Returns is basically a Bruce Wayne Batman story set in the future. Bruce Wayne is already at 55 years old and is already retired from fighting crime, but he has decided to return to wear his costume once again to defend Gotham City from the crazy crime and all the criminals that have been running amok. The Dark Knight Returns is groundbreaking. It sort of predicted the death of one of the Robins in the Batman storyline. That is, of course, Jason Todd, who eventually got killed in the hands of the Joker in the comic book series A Death in the Family, which came out approximately 5 years, maybe, from the time when The Dark Knight Returns came out. It also features the death of some major Batman characters, including those close to him, and of course, his arch-villain. Batman The Dark Knight Returns features appearances from Batman's most well-known foes, namely Two-Face and, of course, the Joker. And also a classic confrontation scene with Superman, who, for those of you who are not familiar with, of course, had another confrontation scene in a more recent Batman vs. Superman movie, where the look of Batman taking on Superman was definitely taken from the look of Batman in this graphic novel, The Dark Knight Returns, which preceded it by several decades. I mean, imagine this thing came out in 1986 and already nailed the look of an armored Batman. It was originally published with the series titled Batman The Dark Knight, and then there's a different subtitle for each issue. So it was basically in deluxe format, meaning it was a thicker comic book form. It was in 4 different issues, and I think it came out once every couple of months. I did own the first two issues, the first printing of the first two issues. I gave those to my dad, and then I just decided to get the compilation with all the four issues in one volume. And I do not know where the first printing of that is. I do have a more recent printing copy of The Dark Knight Returns, which I recommend you go get, since, of course, prices for the first printing of the original four-part series has already gone up and are actually quite hard to find. So the titles for the four issues of The Dark Knight Returns graphic novel: The Dark Knight Returns is actually the title of the first one. The Dark Knight Triumphant is for book 2, Hunt the Dark Knight book 3, and The Dark Knight Falls for book 4. So it's just a four-part miniseries. And the series was collected into a single volume later that year. The title of the first issue was applied to the entire series, so hence the title, The Dark Knight Returns. It is widely considered to be one of the greatest and most influential Batman stories ever made, as well as one of the greatest works of comic art in general, and has been noted for helping reintroduce a darker and more mature-oriented version of the character. And I'm telling you, you can read it now, it still nails it. It still has that very modern feel, and everything from the look and everything from the writing is just spot on, and has really taken the comic book art medium into a new direction, and the storyline into a more serious, darker path. There is a direct animated adaptation of the story, also titled Batman The Dark Knight Returns. The film was released as a two-part film from 2012 and 2013. Overall, The Dark Knight Returns is a must-read for any Batman fan, or if you're just a comic book lover who loves to read a storyline that's deeper, richer, darker, and more immersive. A novel with illustrations. The Dark Knight Returns by Frank Miller, Klaus Johnson, and Lynn Varley from DC Comics.